Hey everybody, I'm Live's Nick Baumgardner here, back for another edition of Ask Nick, our weekly Michigan football mailbag here on MLive. We're actually ready for a football game. Michigan opens its 2014 season, as we know, on Saturday against App State. Thanks again to everybody who participates in these mailbags. We did a couple throughout the offseason, but we'll get back into a regular weekly fashion here. And of course, also I mentioned earlier this week, if you have a question for any mailbag at any point in time during the season, ask it whenever. Don't wait for that midweek post because we're not going to do that anymore. So if you have a question, email me, get me on Twitter, or leave a comment in any story, and I'll find it, and we'll round them up, and we'll do them on Friday. But moving forward to this week's question, everything has been about the offensive line. What can we expect from Michigan's offensive line? Now, I got that many times. That was a popular question all offseason. It's a popular question again this week. So, what can we expect from Michigan's offensive line? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? I don't know, and that's really the big thing going into this game. No one really knows because, you know, we've only seen them twice. We saw them at the end of spring, and they're in the public scrimmage a couple weeks ago. And at the end of spring, they didn't look good, and in the public scrimmage, it did not look good. And so, but I don't want to make a sweeping judgment and say that they're going to struggle just because of those two, situations. I mean, did we see them on a bad day? We might have. Was the defense just that much better? It might have been. I mean, I'm of the belief that this defense actually be pretty good. So, was that part of the deal? I don't know. Where this offensive line is at, that's the biggest key and the biggest question mark and the biggest, thing holding this whole season together for Michigan. If that offensive line can take that step forward and become accountable, and they don't have to be dominant, they just have to be, in my opinion, they just have to be average. You just have to be moving the ball, not a stalemate every time, but, inching forward. You don't have to be mauling people, but you can't be giving up huge tackles for loss. You can't be getting your quarterback killed, and you have to give your running backs a chance to have something in a hole, with a hole. They just give your playmakers a chance. That's what you're asking your offensive line to do, because Michigan does have playmakers pretty much all over the field. I mean, you have an athletic quarterback who led the conference in yards per attempt last season. Baumgardner also, there's not one player, including Braxton Miller, who was hurt, not one player in the Big Ten currently on a roster gained more yards total offense last year than Baumgardner per game. So he's the guy. I mean, Devin can make plays if you give him a chance. I really believe these running backs can make plays if you give them a chance. I think Derek Green and Davion Smith are talented football players. I think we saw glimpses of that last year, and I think a year seasoned with those guys is just going to do things, but they have to have an opportunity. We know Devin Funchess can do some things. We know some of these young wide receivers are talented. But again, you have to give them a chance to do something. This offensive line just has to do its job. They don't have to be the star of the team. Just do your job and move forward. So, when I look at that offensive line on Saturday, and again, we don't know who's going to be the right guard, whether it be Kyle Kalis, who's still dealing with that back, or Joe Brzezinski, the former walk-on, who might get the start if Kalis can't go. But when I look at that group, what we're going to be looking at is, are they communicating? Are they making reads properly? Do they look in sync? Because last year's group never looked in sync. They had so many issues with blitz pickups because the communication was never there on the interior. The interior is so important, and then now you look at Mason Cole on the left side there at left tackle, a true freshman. That's important as well. He's going to have to be talked to. Jack Miller is going to be the center on Saturday. He has to be the guy that calms everybody down, that gets everybody together, and they have to just be a group. And they were never a group of five last year. It was two tackles, and then it was three guys in the middle that was a constant rotation of different players, and none of them ever looked like they were on the same page. Be on the same page. If you make a mistake, everybody make it together. That's sort of what I look at when I look at this. If one guy is consistently blowing assignment and they're getting blown up in the backfield over and over again because you're just missing blitz pickups and blitz reads. If the same mistakes that we saw last year are being repeated, then it's obviously a cause for concern, because that means what did you really learn? If they're making mistakes, but it's not the same kind of stuff. If it's a mistake in the it's hard to explain. But if they're not dominating the line of scrimmage and just powering through people consistently, I'm not going to bag completely on them because they have a long way to go. I mean, they were a young football team last year, a young group last year. They're not going to be perfect. They're still learning a new offense. I think there's going to be bumps in the road. Just how bad are those bumps? And that's really what we're looking at right here when we look at this offensive line and how we're going to try to grade it. Is it a group that's moving as five together, moving forward, communicating, looking like they know what they're doing, looking like they're ready to play football, or is it a group that's just, got a head on its swivel, just, a fire drill? I mean, that's what it was last year. And if Baumgardner has time in the pocket, if Baumgardner's smart at the line of scrimmage and is able to kind of help Michigan get away from some of these blitzes that they're surely going to face, and if you give your running backs a chance to do something, then I think that's a win, and that's a good day for Michigan's offensive line, because at the end of the day, I do think it's going to take 3, 4, maybe even 5 games for this whole offense, the line in particular, to really come together and figure out what it's doing. The offensive line last year was bad. It was bad for a lot of reasons. It was bad because you played young people, but more than that, it was bad because you consistently shuffled guys around. They never found 5 and just stuck with them. And if I would be, if there is one thing to be concerned about if you're Michigan right now, it's that, is this 5 that's going to start on Saturday the 5 that's going to start against Notre Dame? I really don't know that, because we don't know what to make of Kalis' injury, number one, and we don't know what to make of Graham Glasgow's suspension. Graham Glasgow started every game last year in the interior. I thought Graham Glasgow was Michigan's best interior lineman wire to wire last year. He was a starter with the ones there in that public scrimmage. So Graham Glasgow is probably going to play. Whose job does he take? Does he come in and play center? Does he come in and play that right guard spot? If he comes in and plays center, does that sort of fiddle with somebody else's guard spot? I don't know. I mean, what happens there? Does that mean that if he plays one of the guards, does that mean Jack Miller stays, Kyle Kalis enters, Magnuson goes out to left tackle, and Mason Cole's out? I don't know. But at some point, you have to pick 5. You have to determine who those 5 guys are, and you have to let them go, and you have to let them learn as a group and learn as a unit, make mistakes together, make progress together, and move forward together. It can't be a situation where you're plucking. Injuries are one thing, but if you're just pulling guys and plucking guys and trying to put stopgaps in here every other week like you did in the middle of last season, it's going to be a bad deal. And I really think, I go back and I look at last season and I think about this. If Michigan had just stuck with the first 5 guys it threw out on the field, even the group that struggled against Akron, that group that struggled against UConn, if they had just stuck with that 5 and moved forward and let that 5 kind of figure itself out, I really think things would have been better. So I'm a real believer in that if you pick 5 and you go with 5, you get your 5 best guys and you go. You've had all offseason to determine who that is. You should know at this point. Injuries are one thing you can't control, but you should know who your best 5 are. Those are the guys that you have to have on the field. They have to play together, they have to learn together and grow together. If you do that and you move forward with that, then I think this offensive line will be better, because I don't think it can be worse. And I don't think you're asking it to be dominant. I think you're asking it to be adequate, to be average, to be accountable. And if your offensive line can be accountable, if it can do all those things, if it can stop killing plays and give your playmakers a chance, then I think Michigan could have a pretty special season. If that doesn't happen, Michigan's going to struggle. But, Saturday will be the first test. That'll be our first glimpse of it, and then we'll have a better idea of how to answer that question. So long story short, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see, but I'm excited to see what we will be getting to watch there on Saturday. So until next week, we'll talk to you guys then for this mailbag next week. Brendan and I will be back on Saturday night to talk to you and wrap up Saturday's game. Hope everyone enjoys the game. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you later.